I'm Milwaukee Historian John Gurda. The story of the Concordia neighborhood all around me here begins in downtown Milwaukee back in the mid-1800s. It was then that some of the wealthiest families in Milwaukee began to build lavish homes on the high ground above the Menominee Valley on one side and the business area on the other. Among the richest there was a guy named Alexander Mitchell, and he was a banker, railroad tycoon who built a lavish mansion on what's now 9th and Wisconsin. It's still there and still in use. It's now the Wisconsin Club. So Mitchell's home set the tone for the development of what's now Wisconsin Avenue as this rich area all the way out to 35th Street, kind of a mansion row, a king's row. And it was called Spring Street early on. 1876, they changed the name to Grand Avenue because of all the grand homes. So this was where the West Side's wealth was concentrated. By the end of the 1800s, the wealthy families had reached 27th Street, and they began to kind of spread out here to the north and west and came as far north as right here on Highland Boulevard. So this whole area, the whole Concordia neighborhood, became kind of a zone of affluence here on Milwaukee's west side. The bookends were Grand Avenue on the south and Highland Boulevard here in the north. In between was a zone of people who weren't necessarily the beer barons and tanners and publishers, but doing just fine. So this is very much an above average neighborhood economically. And in between them was a very unusual development that had been here first, and that was Concordia College, which is where the neighborhood's name comes from, right across Highland Boulevard right here. They began downtown back in 1881, moved out here to the countryside back in 1883. It was a Missouri Synod Lutheran pre-seminary school, and its market was largely German-speaking farm boys who wanted to be pastors. That's what they were doing. This was a prep school for people who wanted to be ministers. So a very different economic stratum from the people all around the area, but the ethnic patterns were very much the same. They were German, and so were the families who lived around them, especially here on Highland. You have the Pabst family was right here. The one right behind me is Fred Jr. Next door was his brother Gus. Where Aurora Family Services, this was the Frederick Miller Mansion. He had Usingers and Kiekafers and Filters and Manigolds. This area was so populated by wealthy Germans that at one time it was called Sauerkraut Boulevard. So that sobriquet lasted for a number of years. That mansion period lasted between roughly 1890 and 1915, roughly 25 years. So certainly intense, but relatively short-lived. What happened was by the World War I era, a lot of the wealthy families had cars. So they're mobile and begin to move west to places like Washington Highlands, Washington Heights, Elm Grove. Others moved to the east side. So right behind me here, Gus Pabst moves from Highland Boulevard to Terrace Avenue, overlooking Lake Michigan. So a very different kind of a settlement. And what happened to their old mansions is a lot of them were kind of cut up for light housekeeping or perhaps rooming houses. And some of these homes had been one family and their domestic staffs. And after the rich people left, they might have had as many as 20 households in one of these homes. Others were torn down and replaced by apartment buildings. So what you had in this area was just a huge increase in density. So that was the pattern here, and that continued long term. After that long time out for the Depression and World War II, the pattern intensified, and you have a lot more mansions coming down, a lot more apartment buildings going up, and a whole lot more density. The really densest area of the entire neighborhood is right around 29th and Wells, where by roughly 1970 you have nearly 700 housing units within one block of that corner. So it really was a remarkable increase in density. At the same time, after World War II, Concordia College across the street here decided to expand. By that time, they were a 4-year co-ed school and still doing ministerial education, but they'd also bought Spencerian Business College. So they had specialties like court reporting as well as liturgical music. So it became very much a much broader kind of institution and decided to expand in place. So began to buy property within the area right around the campus perimeter. In time, they owned roughly 100 houses. They tore about half of them down, and the rest they managed with what might have been considered by some less care than might have been appropriate. So by 1970, finally, the preservation movement is taking hold in America and in Milwaukee. And what is more worth preserving than the homes here in the Concordia neighborhood? So this became a real magnet for preservationists. They began to put pressure on Concordia to take better care of its properties, and to make a long story short, Concordia reacted by leaving. In 1983, they moved from the Concordia neighborhood, left their name here, but moved out to Mequon, to the old Notre Dame convent. And the remaining properties were bought by a nonprofit called the West Side Development Corporation, and they rehabbed them, they sold them to owner-occupants, and that was a catalyst that really helped to kind of provide momentum for the rediscovery and resurgence of this entire neighborhood. The sweat equity here is just remarkable. You know, these homes virtually wrecks when they were purchased and were restored to their original glory by people who love their older homes and were willing to put the money and the time in. So that is the neighborhood of Concordia in 2020. This began as a haven for the gentry. The old money is long gone, but this neighborhood has discovered a new kind of wealth. This has a range of housing styles, housing types, cultures, and lifestyles that makes it among the most dynamic and most distinctive and most diverse neighborhoods in Milwaukee.